This is Greg Canty here, and welcome to the Win Happy podcast. Stay tuned for interesting chats with interesting people about winning their lives and being happy at the same time. This show has been brought to you by Fusion Communications. Thanks for listening. On today's podcast, I chat with Australian writer of novels, comics, scripts, and music producer Morgan Quaid. This conversation fascinates me because Morgan balances a double life. He is the 9-to-5 person working in a mundane role, but he is also this very real and different creative force who even goes by another name. Can you win happy when you don't go all in on that thing that you love? Let's hear from Morgan. Morgan Quaid, a huge welcome to the Win Happy podcast. How are you keeping?
Good, thank you. Thank you for having me. Great to be here, and excited to have a chat with you for sure.
The kind of curious thing from my point of view is that it's the last day of May. Summer is starting to kick in. Those bright nights, that promise of good weather. It's a bit of a different story for you because it's not the 31st of May where you're sitting. It's the 1st of June.
Correct. Yes. So we've just come into winter. So we've just the hint of depression sneaking in as the weather starts to get cold. And in fact, yesterday and today have dropped in temperature quite a bit very quickly. So it's announced itself fairly vividly winter. So so we're heading in opposite directions, and I'm just a little bit in the future from where you are. And so far everything's okay. We've all survived, so that's good.
Yeah, well, you're coming to me from Brisbane in Australia, and it's kind of peculiar. You know, I was telling you before we started recording that my son was in New Zealand for a while with his partner, and while they were there, my granddaughter was born, Hazel. So there's a big dispute now, Morgan, going on because was she born on the 7th of October or on the 8th? Yeah. In Ireland, it was definitely the 7th, and so she's going to have two birthdays. So you're a writer, a composer, and a music producer. But
yes,
you also have a day job, and there's a lot of things going on, Morgan, under the hood, so to speak.
And look, I've found creatively and just running life and all the rest of it, I found success at trying a lot of different things. I have a lot of different interests, and I get bored quickly. So I think that's what drives a lot of the different interests. But I've found more success by trying a lot of different ways. Certainly with music initially, trying to get things out there in different ways and different avenues that I never would have thought of previously. And then you have a little bit of success in one area, so you think, great, I'll go in that direction. And then that sort of peters out and you go in another direction. So I've diversified, I suppose you could say, to use the swanky finance term. But I've always had desire to do writing full-time, music full-time, all that sort of stuff. But when I got to the point of having a taste of that with the music, I realized it may not be everything that I want, because I write music and writing because I enjoy it, and I write what I want to write, and I pick up the projects that I want to pick up. So it's all sort of joyful, and it's still hard work, but it's that kind of great hard work. Whereas if I'm doing it for a job, then I have to write music and writing and all that sort of stuff for other people, for their projects all the time, just to make enough money. And I can't sort of stop and have a pause or any of that sort of stuff. So, I've found a nice equilibrium, I think, between having a day job, which doesn't use the creative side of my brain a lot, and using that for stability and money and all that sort of stuff. So I can focus on the creative stuff with more or less complete freedom. There's not a lot of boundaries on, what I can pick and choose and that sort of stuff.
I find it quite interesting. I was chatting with my nephew last week, and we had the pleasure of interviewing a woman who is 101 next week.
Wow.
Sister Stanislaw. She's a presentation order nun, and it's part of a project where we're working and was recording a podcast with her. And I decided to grab my nephew just to capture it on video as well. So he's a videographer trying to make his way. And I'm not sure exactly what his age is. He's mid-20s. And he's in between getting a proper full-time job, which he had a while back in one of these mobile phone shops, and doing his thing and hoping to get gigs. And he was more or less saying to me, he's quite happy being poor and waiting for the gigs to come along when they do. And just leaving that work stuff behind. What do you think? What would you say to him?
Yeah, well, I think that there's often been, I don't know whether it's a myth or a belief that's out there that if you're not doing the thing that you love full time, you're not giving it your all, you're not, and there's a huge difference between doing it part-time and then doing it as all right, I fully believe in this now. And I know from people, a friend of mine quit his day job to do writing full-time because of this, passion. Look, if I don't do it now, I'm never going to do it, all the rest of that. I've kind of gone the other way, and I think there's more than one way to look at it. And I think there are huge benefits to having a, dull day job, if for want of a better term, and the creative side running parallel, either for a long period of time or for a period of time until you sort of move into creative stuff full time. So, for instance, if one of my projects gets picked up by someone very big, ends up on Netflix, and they want me to write scripts and those sorts of things, if those opportunities come up, there's no way I'm doing a day job. Then absolutely, I'll give that up and put everything into the creative project. But very few people that get into that space. So in the interim, I'm happy to have the stability of the job and, these passion projects. And like I say, I can pick and choose. I also, as I said earlier, I get very bored. So the idea of doing the same thing day in and day out, which is, I know, funny for a writer to say, but the idea of being locked into the same sort of stuff, I've done a lot of, particularly in music, work for other people, and it's fine and it's great, but it does get to the point where I get very, very bored. By example, I'm not a massive fan of country music, and apologies to everyone out there that I've just defended. I'm not a massive fan, but I would, while I was doing session work, continually get requests for country music. And some of the projects as well, they weren't particularly good songs. It's really hard to invest yourself in this, project, but you do it because you're doing it for the money and, providing a service and whatnot. That side of things is really soul destroying for me, to do the thing that I love most, but in service to something I don't believe in. That is worse to me than working in a job that pays the bills I'm not really that invested in, but I will do my job and do it well. I'd rather do that and keep them separated and almost keep the passion pure, if that makes sense.
In a strange way, can a boring day job where you're expected to function, you're a responsible adult, you need to punch in the time, deliver for your organization, in a funny way, is that a source of creativity? The fact that you can separate things, and for those, 7 hours a day when you are doing something totally different, does that actually feed your creative side, or do you literally become a different person at that time?
That's a good question. I do feel like, okay, so writing is lying, let's be honest. So writing is telling stories and, fabricating and all that. It's a form of lying which is developed and all the rest of it. So I'm very good at that. So most of my time at work, I'm acting, I'm being another person, which, a lot of us do that, in different circumstances. But I'm a different persona. I'm feigning interest in things that honestly I really don't care about, but I do for the sake of the job and for doing a good job and not letting people down and all the rest of it. But on the global scheme of things, that's not where I would normally go. So, yeah, it is an interesting one because it's almost like I'm an actor on stage during that, and then I'm my real self when I'm writing or talking to people about creative projects or that sort of stuff. Yeah. And sorry, I completely forgot the second part of your question, which was really good.
Yeah, well, I'm kind of asking, is it a source of your creativity? The fact that you can jump away from that creative side, in a way, does it give you a bit of hunger, when 5 p.m. comes and you can get home to doing the stuff you're really passionate about? the fact that your brain gets a little bit of a break from that full-on creative responsibility every day.
Yeah, it's definitely not an inspiration. So there's very little after, 15 years working in industry, there's very little there that surprises and that, oh my goodness, I should write a book about that. There's not a lot of that goes on. But as you say, there's no drain on creativity. So during that period of time, I'm not using the creative muscles so much, which means for me, usually before work, early in the morning, I'll do most of my writing and creative stuff, occasionally at night as well. You're right, that there's just been no drain throughout the day. There have been a few times where I've been involved in work projects where I've had to use that part of my brain. And it frankly makes me really angry because then I go to write and I'm exhausted and I think this is not right. That's not what that job's for. That shouldn't be the way. So I try and avoid that where I can. And it's interesting. I've had managers over the years who have found out what I do outside of work and have said, oh, you should really bring that into work and bring it to the corporate world and all this sort of stuff. And I've actively resisted that because that would be, again, destroying something I love and turning – it's what the corporate world does with language. So they will take a scientific term or a term from the arts and they will – flatten it out and make it mean something that they will ruin the English language as part of business speak. So, for instance, what are the takeaways from this? What are the learnings from? No, that's not the correct way to use those words. You're using words wrong, but you're doing it as part of a colloquial kind of business speak to make yourself seem more, I don't know, intelligent, in tune with the business world. So I hate the thought of anything I create being sort of, dragged into that same gristmill of corporate life.
Yeah, so in a strange way, Morgan, you have four walls around your creative life and four walls around that day job, and you're nearly deliberately keeping them miles apart. You don't want them to infect each other in a strange sort of a way.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I may write the zombie apocalypse book that takes place in a corporate setting, and some of that corporate stuff does come into my writing every now and then. But yeah, I've deliberately tried to keep them separate. I've found that for me, that's the best method of coping with both worlds and getting the most, you have to discipline yourself to write every day. Everything gets to a point, no matter how much you enjoy it, where it's just work. And it's a lot easier to have the energy for that if it's not being diluted by my day job, if I can put it that way.
Because there are days, aren't there, where whatever you're working in, it's just like punching in a bit of time. It can be quite a mundane task and it doesn't challenge you too much. But sometimes you need those days, don't you, where you're just floating along. Yeah. That's okay. I can go home now.
Yeah.
I'm really intrigued by this conversation because at the core of Win Happy, for me, it's about making decisions with your life where I talk about chiseling, where you chisel out a life for yourself that has you working on your passions, achieving your objectives, and just making all of that work. And it sounds to me like you've done that in a very unusual way, nearly to the point where you have two personas. And you're saying that a very, very exclusive club in the workplace know the Morgan Quaid version of you.
Yeah.
And maybe to put a bigger spotlight into it, the nature of your work and the type of work that you do. Like I know there's novels, there's comics, there's graphic novels, there's scripts. And some of the books you've written, I'm looking at some of the titles here: The Blood Below, The Script Rebellion, Whiplash, The Seven Hungers, Shadow's Daughter. Yeah, I'm not seeing that in you delivering training sessions in your role in work and having a coffee and a croissant at the break and how are you getting on. I won't go there with your real name, but how are you getting on? How was your weekend? Oh, it's fine. What did you do? Yeah, I watched TV. I was a bit tired after the week's work, so I just kind of chilled out and stuff. This is unusual. There's a very talented singer that I know, really, really talented. And he brought out an album last year. And this particular character holds down a full-time job as well. A little bit the same in that you would expect in his full-time job where he could go to that creative side. And he brought out an album, which is incredible. And he's had a lot of success. But I think he's wondering why he isn't more successful.
Mm.
And as you know, music is such a tricky thing.
Yeah.
He gets airplay and all that kind of stuff. And my observation of him is that the full-time job robs him of a little bit of hunger.
Mm.
I suspect that little hunger is absolutely needed to bring something to the next level. You know, you hear people like starvation is a great motivator at times, and having to punch things out. And of course, anyone in the creative world, you're always running that risk of the well going dry and not having money to put food on the table or rent and everything else. It's so speculative and lucrative and everything else and unreliable. Do you think there's a fear that it could take that edge away from you, that little bit of hunger that might push you and force you a little bit more to, I don't know, get exposure, maybe do things you're a little bit uncomfortable with?
Mm. Yeah, look, I think I think first of all, there's, different courses for different horses and different people approaching things differently. I have had that thought many times, and for a long time, I had thought success for me is doing what I love full time, and I could not countenance working a day job. And for many years, was thinking, no, success for me is I need to get away from that day job and just be doing full time creative stuff. It was only after I started doing a lot more creative stuff and was at the point where I thought, okay, I could do music full time now and earn slightly less than I'm earning, but enough to get by. Do I want to do that? Spoke to my wife. She was supportive of it, of course. But I realized there's probably two facets to me that mean the path I've taken is probably better for the moment anyway. One is productivity. So I don't have that thing I don't have that perfectionist thing that a lot of creators and writers have. I don't have that. I'm never happy with this thing. This thing has to be perfect. My inner demon isn't that. My inner demon is you're not doing enough. You need to do more. When is this going to get done? When is the third book in the trilogy going to be done? So productivity is my main driver. So I tend to produce a lot very quickly, and I write quickly, and of course it's not quickly enough for my own brain, so there's that drive for productivity, which means even though I'm working a day job, I get a lot done. And then the flip side of that coin is burnout and how quickly I lose interest in things. And I'm not going to at all compare myself to Da Vinci, but one of the things that I liked about the way people have described him, I don't know, as though they knew him, is he started 1 million projects and finished very few. And he would go where his interest lay at that moment. So whatever caught his fancy, he would, run in that direction, and for a period of time would just throw everything at it, and then he'd lose interest and go to something else. I really identify with that same method with my own work, where if I am captivated by a particular something, I will run in that direction as hard as I can for as long as I can, and then I'll tend to burn out. And then it's a decision around, all right, well, I need to just keep working to get to the end of this thing because I have to complete it. And then I'll shift to something else or whatever the case may be. So my fear is if I do this full time and this is all I'm doing, unless it's so successful that I have the flexibility to take my time and still pick and choose what I would like to work on. So unless it's hugely successful, I fear I would burn out very quickly and then get disillusioned and then, all of that sort of stuff. The other thing is there's also a huge chasm in my mind between where I'm at and where I would like to be doing this full time. And then there's that middle ground, that chasm where I could be doing this full time, but it would be incredibly hard struggle. I would still essentially be doing the same thing that I'm doing now, but I would need to do it for, to provide for my family rather than I'm doing it as a pleasure and a joy so in my case, it certainly hasn't reduced the passion or the output, I don't think, because any more time that I'm given, I just wouldn't have the brain power or creative energy to do any more with that, if that makes sense, at the moment where I am anyway. Yeah.
Do you like your day job?
It is the best job I've ever had. I love my team. I love so of all the jobs I've had that are day jobs, yes, I do enjoy it. And I'm not thrilled to go to work. I'll put it that way. It is essentially the same. It's a corporate environment. It's the same struggles every day. It's the same, I've had 5 leaders in the past 7 years. it's the same corporate churn. It's the same capitalist kind of mentality. It's rewarding the wrong behavior. It's all of that stuff. And it's this, you're almost in this closed system of amnesia where the company never remembers anything. So someone new comes in, let's try this amazing new thing that we tried 2 years ago, but no one bothers to look back and see what was the result then. And we tried and it fails, and it becomes a bit like a factory. You're cycling every 2 or 3 years through the same ideas, the same sort of business speak concepts. Nothing ever changes, nothing ever moves on. So that side is quite monotonous, and I don't really enjoy. But I enjoy the people I work with. The work is interesting enough to keep me, there's a lot of strategy involved in what I'm, fixing problems essentially is what I'm doing. So yes, kind of is probably my answer.
Okay. What I'd like to do is to talk about your work. But before we jump into that, I'd love for the listener to get a sense of who you are and how you got here.
Right.
So we might do a whistle-stop tour. So I'm going to ask you a question that I ask of a lot of my guests.
Mm-hmm.
Who the hell are you and where did you come from?
Very good. So I was born in the city of Melbourne, Australia. Fairly heavily religious family when I grew up. I had an interest in reading and writing, anything to do with fantasy, anything to do with escapism, that sort of stuff. I loved that side of things. Got into music very early. My parents sort of forced me into playing guitar, did that for 6 years, never got any better. I was, very young. And then as a teenager, I picked it up. My family moved to Cairns, which is a lot hotter, tropical sort of climate in Queensland. Yeah, and then as I got out of school, music was the focus. That was the thing that I thought, yes, I'm going to be in a band and it's going to be amazing. Somehow I have to do this full time. And then reality kicked in, and then there were many, many, many day jobs, sort of customer service jobs that were quite soul destroying, but necessary in building character, I suppose. And then, kept going, and then started moved into the insurance industry and then banking, and found some stability in that sort of area. And while I was there doing that, that was really when the writing kicked back in again. I suppose the boredom of corporate life made me think, okay, I need to get back into writing. I was really trying to be a novelist for a long time. I'm still not convinced I know what a novel is. I'm still working to. I'm at my 12th novel at the moment that I'm finishing off. Most of them are still in the process of being edited and released, so they're not out there yet, but I'm up to my 12th novel. I'm convinced if I get to 30, I might, by that stage, know what a novel is and how it should be constructed and all of that sort of stuff. It's still a bit of a mystery to me. Anyway, so I was trying to do the novelist side of things, trying to go the traditional route of having a literary agent and then a big publisher and all that. So, again, talk about soul destroying. So there are thousands of rejection letters, and most of them are just stock letters that just say, no, we're not interested. Some of them really frustratingly are, oh, yes, this sounds very interesting. Send us the first 50 pages. And then you send 50 pages and then they come back and say, I kid you not, verbatim, oh, it's not what I thought it was. That's it. No right of reply. No, oh, well, could I make it what you think it is? No. So it's very disheartening. So I sort of went away from novels, and then the music really picked up again, but more in the back end side of things. So working as a producer and with music loops, which producers use, and a lot of those sort of things, and then writing for film and TV in the background, which is there's very little. If you're wanting to sort of promote your image or whatnot, it's very hard in that sort of area, but you can actually make money. So I was in this curious spot where no one knew who I was. I wasn't getting any traction in terms of being recognizable, but I was making money in the music industry for the first time. So I kept doing that and have done that ever since. First time, it was more satisfying for my wife, I will add, for her to actually see, oh, wow, one of your things is actually starting to pay off. That's good. Can we pay the home loan off now, please? Yeah, it was very, very satisfying and strange to see a creative outlet making money. It was that weird moment where I realized, oh, you can actually, people do this for a living. It is an actual thing that's viable if you do it a certain way.
What was that piece of music, Morgan?
Well, this is the thing. It wasn't a piece. It was a loop pack through a company that sells loops online. Well, 3 or 4 loop packs that I put together, and I just put them in, and away they went. And then a month went by, and then I think it was $500 came in. And I thought, I've never made $500 from stuff. Even when I was doing gigs, I never made that much. This is ridiculous. And the thing is, the way that it's set up is it month by month, it keeps coming in. And the more products you sell, the more you're making. And it's repeatable because it's a digital product and all the rest of it. So I was able to build a business that way, and then started thinking, okay, this is an actual business. I'm self-employed, and I have to think of it like a business now. So it was really that over that month that I realized this could be a thing. And then the next, few years were me trying to work out what are the limits of it, how much can I make, and there are definite limits to what you can do there. And then starting to explore writing for film and TV, which is another bizarre industry. So it's not so much, in my case, someone coming to me and saying, we've got a show, we need you to write blah, blah, blah. It's much more, you write a bunch of pieces of music and you give them to libraries that hold that music, and then they work with production companies to place the music and all the rest of it. It's only been in the last 5 or 6 years that they've started coming to me specifically for, hey, we know you can do this, we've got a show, can you do that sort of thing?
So is that the case of you're selling atmospheric pieces or little segments that would just fit in somewhere in a movie or a TV show? They're not actual songs, but they're just collections of musical sequences. Would that be right? Or
well, what you usually do is you produce it as a song that's maybe 1.5, 2 minutes long, but within that song you have a lot of ups and downs, and you will have what they call a sting or a stinger version, which is a short little music version. You might have a bumper, which is 15 seconds or so. So within the one song, you'll produce 3 or 4 different versions, and then they may use different versions. They might have a version that's got no guitars or a version that's got no drums. So you produce that. So it's one song, but it's really 7 or 8 songs in that one song. And that's what you give them, and that's what they use because it gives them the most flexibility. But it is in Australia at the moment. Well, actually, it just depends. But I think my first royalty started coming in 2 years after I first placed tracks. And it can be 2, 3, 4 years before you actually see the money from it. So it's a really long-term thing. And again, it supplements the overall business, but it's not enough. None of my songs have been picked up by Coca-Cola or KFC or any of those companies. So it's not as though I'm living rich off them. But the business was doing well enough that I considered going full time, and then tried it kind of for a bit, and it just didn't feel right. And I was being forced to do things that I didn't really want to do, and they were sort of sucking the passion out of me. Then I, on a way home from work, go into a comic shop in Brisbane. Never interested in comics as a kid. Wasn't my thing. Just really wasn't interested. I think the interplay between words and pictures confused me. It was too much writing for the pictures and too many pictures for the writing, so I could never quite get my head around it. Anyway, I walk in and I see this array of indie comics that have come out in the last 10 years. I start picking them up, start reading through, and I think, my God, what have I been doing all this time? This is amazing that they can do anything. Any story is up for grabs. Any style is up for grabs. You get the artwork and the story. And in my mind, this is one step away from film, which I love. Film and TV, absolutely adore. So I immediately bought everything I could, took it home, started reading, and then thought, those novels that I have, I'm going to turn them into comics and start producing comics. And that's where the whole comic creation journey started. Then you're working with artists all around the world. You're working with, you're doing lettering, typesetting, the whole thing, which the music side of things prepared me very well for, because I was already running a business. So if you think of comic creation as a business, you're thinking about it the right way. If it's just a passion project, that's fine. But it's very different if you're wanting to make money off it, and very hard to make money out of it. But to see a novel is an amazing experience for me. A finished novel that I've done, and particularly when a series grows. But to see a comic that an artist has put the words that you've said into a visual representation, that's an amazing experience and quite addictive when you get sucked into it.
I'm just imagining what it must be like to brief the artist to bring some of these characters to life that you've had in your head for a while. What was the first project you worked on where one of the characters that you created suddenly appeared in flesh nearly? It was someone else's visualization of the character that you created.
So there's a series called Shadow's Daughter, which is about it's a sort of urban fantasy story about a bounty hunter who can bend shadow and use it as a weapon and all of this sort of stuff. And honestly, the story behind the novel that I wrote first was, I always said I'm never going to write a book about vampires or werewolves or any of that sort of junk. It was right at the time that a certain series was very, very popular, and I thought, I'm not going to do any of that. And then I thought, well, you're a writer, you should push yourself, so write something that has vampires in it. So that's where the story came from. So it's a great story, but it was kind of not an afterthought, but it was one of those things that was like, I'm going to do this as an exercise and see if I can do it and enjoy it and create a world that I still like. So that was the novel. Then it was one of the first comics that I was working with. I had to find an artist. I found an artist in the state that had like a studio of 3 or 4 people that he was working with. And that was the first time I saw an image of Summer, is the name of the main character, and a few of the other characters in there. And it was amazing, an amazing experience. And very, very few times have I gone back to an artist on any of the projects and said, that's not how I've envisaged them. And that's 2 reasons. One is they're artists. They do this all day. They're very good at it. The other reason is, I only found this out last year, I have this condition, I suppose you could call it, called aphantasia, which essentially means I don't have a visual imagination. So when people close their eyes and you say, think of an apple, if I close my eyes, I just see black.
Okay.
I can't see anything. And apparently 2 or 3% of people have this, but it's in varying degrees, but it's only recently become known as a thing. And it's been a revelation to me, because I've realized this is why I have so many arguments with my wife about renovations to the house and things, because I can't imagine any of it. But even to the point where I can't remember my mother's face. I can't remember my wife's face, my colleague's face. I can't represent them visually in my mind, which means when I'm telling an artist this is what this person should be like, I don't have a visual reference unless I've downloaded a picture that I'm using or something like that. So it's really open to interpretation. And then what they come back with, for me, if I like it, that becomes the representation from then on. But yeah, it's interesting. I just don't have a visual picture in mind. It's more described with words and other senses, I suppose.
Because even in our work with marketing, when you're thinking about target audiences, you're forever trying to think of the persona, the bullseye for that person. And you're trying to imagine what they look like and whether they have children or a pet, what kind of relationship they're in, where they're living, the kinds of places they might eat and everything. It's all about trying to visualize it. So I've got a novelist who has created characters, and these characters have been brought to life by someone in the United States that you've never met. And that's the first time, in a way, you actually meet your own characters. Is that true?
It's a strange thing, because I suppose the way that I relate to anyone that I remember everyone vividly, but not visually. So Summer, for instance, the character, I already know her. I know exactly what she's like. I know how she would respond in every circumstance. I know her intimately, and I have a vague idea of what she might look like. So when I see her for the first time, it's not like I'm meeting her for the first time. In a sense, it's more recognition of, oh yeah, that's her, and I can see how her face would change in different circumstances. The other thing, though, is in the comic world, you tend to do different covers for issues. So you have different artists representing different styles. So there are, at the moment, actually, I did an Australian podcast, where there were 5 artists drawing their different rendition of or version of Summer while I was talking to them. So at the moment, there are about 15 different versions of her that all have similarities, but they're slightly different. So it's good because it means there's some flex in what she does actually look like, apart from a few, so in Summer's case, she's sort of Asian American, youngish, sort of early 30s, dark hair, dark features. That's it. That's all. And even now, as I'm talking to you, my brain is trying to visualize the image I know of her, but I cannot bring it to mind. It's such a bizarre thing. But it is interesting. And also, I mean, now I've dealt with probably 30 different artists over the years across the world, some that don't speak English very well, some that are, from Australia, some from America, all over the place. And it's a really interesting thing because you're having to translate your ideas into something they will understand and be able to represent. But every single time, without fail, what they come back with is slightly different to what I'd imagined, but always better than what I was thinking, which is great.
So who is Summer? Tell me all about her.
So Summer she's a bounty hunter that works for an organization, the Bureau, that 30 years earlier or thereabouts, a moon rises. It's like a blood moon, a red moon rises and sort of hangs in the air or hangs in the sky for too long. And while that's happening, the world starts to change, earthquakes, fires, all sorts of floods, all sorts of stuff goes on. So the whole world goes through this cataclysmic change. And as a result of that, preternatural aspects of humans start to emerge. So your vampires, your kind of werewolfy type characters, those sorts of ones. And this group called Mancers, who are basically people that are sorcerers that can manipulate matter, they start to emerge. And so the world that comes out of that is split between mundane people, who are the majority, who live in walled off cities and, keep themselves separate, and this rogue group of remade individuals that are, have all these sort of freakish abilities. And she is one of those. She's a shadowmancer. So her job is working for the Bureau is essentially to hunt down rogue remade individuals that are doing bad stuff and lock them up, essentially. So she's a bounty hunter for that. But her primary interest is, I need to pay rent. I need to get this done as quickly as possible. I need a new bike. That's it. So there's nothing heroic. There's nothing. It's purely the mundane needs of, I've got to pay rent, and this is how I do it. But as the main story progresses, the story is about, she has an incredibly powerful gift, and a gift that, in fact, no one has seen in living memory except once before, and it was with a serial killer who is infamous for what he did, and he was a shadowmancer. So there's kind of this, when people see her gift, there's this automatic fear, not only because she's a mancer, but because it brings back memories of this, ghastly figure. So she's incredibly powerful, and the story is about what happens when she loses that power and what does she do. So it's all about, she's sent to investigate a case to find an individual that's just appeared in the city, and the Bureau top brass are very, very worried about this individual. He hasn't done anything yet, but she's been sent to bring him in, and in the course of trying to apprehend this guy, she loses her ability but also starts to learn more about her heritage, and it's not. And I only realized this recently. I completely gave it away with the title, because the title Shadow's Daughter with an apostrophe and shadows suggests that Shadow is a person or a being, the father of the daughter, whoever the daughter is. So I've kind of given away that there's more there than just her being able to manipulate Shadow. And that's what the story explores.
Where did she come from in your head? What crevice did you have to dig into to produce Summer?
I don't know. Well, I've always loved alternate worlds colliding. I've always loved that idea of a world impinging on this world. I love anything to do with the moon and lunar sort of thing. Partially, I think, because it's a real thing that I see in this world. You know how occasionally you'll get a blood moon or a larger moon than normal? It's a real thing that we actually see. And I think when I was younger, that kind of struck me as this alien thing that is, in fact, not alien at all. So that has come into my writing at a few different points. And honestly, the rest of it was I've set myself a goal to write an urban fantasy novel that is about that vampire and, those sorts of preternatural beings struggling around something. What would be a good setting for that? And then the shadow idea came in, and that just set everything off. So as soon as the Peter Pan thing about the shadow that has its own identity, I was fascinated with that. Just that I love the idea of something insubstantial being a thing that can be used physically, and so that was really good, just to spark the rest of the ideas, and then everything else flowed on from that. You have shadow, of course. Well, then what about light? You have, the mundane people, and then the remade, and how do they clash, and what would a society look like then? So the world kind of fairly quickly built itself, because it's essentially our world, but in this alternate, place where this cataclysm has happened. And then the character of Summer, to be honest, the characters I like, and most of my protagonists tend to go this way. They tend to have a smart mouth. They are either very powerful or not powerful at all, but either way, always end up getting themselves in strife and trouble because of their smart mouth. And she's no exception. She's exactly the same. There's something appealing about that I've always liked. So, yeah.
Is there a character from Earth that you base some of these characters on?
Probably more from film and TV, but it's very hard. For Summer, it's very hard for me to pinpoint someone. There is a character in a separate book, The Blood Below, who's a detective and named Nick Holden. Good old detective name. And he
could have been a DJ.
He could have been a DJ. The only direction I gave the artist for that was I had a picture of Nick Nolte when he was just starting to get really rough around the edges, and sent it. And I said, I want him to look similar to that. But other than that, in terms of, I can't point to one, but the characters I like are the ones that have maybe Bruce Willis in some of his stuff, just that dry wit and, now is, you're in impending danger. Now is not the time to make a smart ass remark, but we know who you are, and you will definitely make a smart ass remark. It's that kind of thing that and I think part of it is things that I would like to do in my real world that I would never do, that my characters can do. Things I would like to say but I never can, but the characters can. It's quite cathartic.
Yeah, well, you're the man with the two different lives. So, have any of your work colleagues or any of your buddies ended up in any of these characters totally unknowns to them?
Not unknown, or unless I've done it without me knowing. There's one character that I've named after someone I work with every day that I really admire and like, and we've worked together for ages. And I named one of my favorite characters after her, but that was a while ago. And the other one, my ex-boss actually said, all I ask is that you write me into to one of your books. And he, was kind of bugging me about it. And I said, okay, I'll write you into my latest book. So my latest series is called The Seven Hungers. It's urban fantasy / horror. Same thing, impinging worlds coming from below. And so I wrote him in as a villain in this character who gets his arm chopped off in the first book, is inhabited by a demonic creature from one of the, they call them hungers, one of the lower realms, like hell realms. And then he, in the second book, doesn't really appear, but he's still there, but he is possessed by this thing. And then in the third book, anyway, so essentially I've got him in there in the series, but it's how much can I torture this character in each book as a bit of a dig, because yes, I can put him in, but you know what that means. That means he's part of the universe now. So he's actually the main villain in this story as it progresses, and he will degenerate more and more as the story goes on. But apart from those two, I don't think so. Other than one thing that you do in comics is if you're doing a Kickstarter campaign, one of the things you tend to offer is you can be drawn into the issue. So You pay a little bit of money, and then you will be the face on a character that gets bisected by a massive sword or shot down or something fun like that. So sometimes people will get themselves drawn in. There's been a few of those. But apart from that, yeah, not really.
Yeah, the mother-in-law didn't end up anywhere, did she?
No. And I think, honestly, partially because I find it's such a silly thing to say, but I find that world so mundane and uninteresting that it just doesn't. So I probably lean more on things I've seen in film and TV or stories that I've read or heard, those sort of characters. Yeah, I'd say.
Yeah, but maybe, Morgan, it's not as mundane as you think. Maybe a lot of these other creatures and characters have different worlds. Actually, that singer I was telling you about, one of his songs is about a character who had a separate life that no one really knew about, but they only discovered it after he had passed away and all the things he was interested in and everything else. Beautiful song. But anyway, I'm loving this idea of those kind of two worlds and those two lives and everything. And I think you're doing exactly what I kind of talk about on Win Happy, chiseling out that life for yourself. What's happiness to you?
So asked me 10 years ago, and I would have said I'm writing a Netflix series, and my books are selling, and I'm well enough known, but not too well known. That would have been the goal 10, 15 years ago. Now, honestly, happiness to me is to be enjoying the writing process and for my things to be read, essentially. That's what it comes down to. If I'm being read and there are people enjoying what I'm doing and waiting for the next thing to come out, that's the most enjoyable thing for me, to have my characters out there living and all the rest of it. I have this idea of 10,000 people equating to 1,000 people. So, if I have 10,000 people that avidly follow what I do, and of those, 1,000 will always buy whatever I put out. In my mind, it's kind of like if I can get to that and it's stable, that's enough that I can potentially do this full time, but also it means I've got this stable group that I can, or community that I can interact with and engage with and all that sort of stuff. Because, writing tends to be a very lonely pursuit sometimes. So, but I think it's to be writing as I am and to be read. The higher peaks of, so for instance, I'm writing a script at the moment, a horror script for an indie director. And the hope is always, through that eventually, it could be something big and all the rest of it. Those highs, I'm a little bit more wary of now. I'm a little bit more wary of Netflix and of those things that I've previously seen as happiness and success. I think they might be part of the success story. I'm not convinced they're necessarily going to be part of the happiness story. So for me, on the writing front, being able to write and being read, and being on the family front, happy with myself, my family, the time that I have to spend, around all of those things that I enjoy.
Have you 2 minutes spare any day to do anything?
Well, ironically, I do. I actually do, because I have a short attention span. And so I will spend, so this morning I spent an hour very early writing. Might have only been 45 minutes or so. And I did not feel like writing at all, but you get into a habit. And I just thought, you trick yourself. I'll just do one sentence. That's it. So, of course, I get down to the computer, open it up, start a sentence. And then a chapter later, I've realized, oh, good, I've done something. I've exercised the demons for the day. I feel good. What I was writing was good stuff. So I do that. And then, usually, family stuff and a bit of social media and promotion, and then get ready for work and all the rest of that. But there is still, like, that 45 minutes to an hour, that's not all my creative energy for the day, but the best creative energy for the day. Anything else I do from now, I could spend 2 or 3 hours writing and it wouldn't be the quality of what I had then. So I've learned that there is a specific time that if I get that, I'm a lot more productive, which that does leave a lot of time for other things. Having said that, I have been feeling lately, and every year I come to this point, okay, Morgan, you're doing too much. You just need to focus on a few less things for a while, just to clear your head and get a little bit more, There's a lot happening, as you say, yeah. I've got to be wary of taking on new projects, but every time something new comes in, and if it's exciting, I think, oh, yes, I'll do it. I'll do it. Absolutely.
Yeah. And if it comes to overload and there's more and more projects there, what will fall out? What's the thing that you're going to stop doing?
Well, so at any moment in time, I have, at the moment, novels, a script, comic book, actually reformatting is a big part of what I'm doing, and then writing and all that sort of stuff. And I have a Kickstarter campaign that I just ran, which I'm in the process of fulfilling. So what I would go down to is, what are the things I need to do because I've agreed to something? So anything where I've said I will do such and such by whatever date for someone, that's priority. All the other projects, they have my own self-imposed deadlines. So the novel I'm writing at the moment is book 4 on that Seven Hungers series. No one's asking for it yet. Like it's the first book has only just been released this year. So I'm so far ahead. It's only me pushing me. So I would drop those for the moment, or try to focus on the things I need to get done. And honestly, I keep coming back to music because the music is what pays for the artwork for the comic stuff and for promotion for books and all that sort of stuff. Because it's not you can do it without paying money, but most of the time you're going to be paying money some way or another to either get it edited, promoted, all that sort of stuff. So the music always tends to come back as a priority, because if that income stream drops, then I can't promote and finish off the work that I've got.
So when the pressure does come on, what will you stop doing? There's no more time in the day. The projects are overloaded.
Yeah.
Would you go down to 4 days a week in the day job? 3 days a week, if it was possible?
Honestly, what I would probably do, if it got overwhelming, positive way, I would take leave from work for a while. Because I always have holidays. I very rarely take them, so I would take those holidays, because I'm terrible at holidays. I don't relax. Relaxing is not enjoyable to me. I need to be productive.
Surprise.
Yeah, that's right. So, by the way, myself and my wife are sitting by a pool in a tropical environment, in a wonderful, relaxed environment, maybe with a pina colada or something. The whole time, my brain will be thinking of plot points for the next book and what I need to do with this comic and promoting. It's very, very hard for me to be present sometimes with those things. And unless it's a physical activity like sport or something, it's, brain's always ticking. So yeah, I would take leave. I actually did this. The first commercial I did for a hotel franchise was an online ad, and they needed some music done. First time I'd done anything like this, it was years ago now. And it was a 2-minute piece of music, but it was the most complex piece of music I've ever had to do. It had 5 distinct components. So it was effectively 5 songs you were doing, and using synths and things that I'd never used before. I didn't even have the equipment, but I said, yes, of course, I'll do it. I was so stressed that I took 2 days off work to work on this thing, and eventually cracked it. Yeah, I was sweating blood with that project. So I would do the same thing. If it got to that point, I would just and for all I say about corporate life and all that sort of stuff, one of the other things I love about particularly the place that I work is they do tend to be more flexible around, okay, I need to take a month off to do a project, or I need to drop down to 1 day a week or whatever. That they tend to be fairly flexible with that, which is another reason why I still work there, because they are forgiving of that sort of thing. So I could do that if I wanted to. Yeah.
A scene has come to my head, Morgan, whereby you're on holidays. It's a beautiful evening. You're sitting with your wife having pina coladas, taking in the calmness, and she's looking romantically into your eyes, and she knows he's not here now.
It's like you're reading me like a book.
Yeah, his head is somewhere else.
There's a cartoon I've seen where a husband and wife are in bed. The wife is looking dreamily at the husband's staring at the ceiling, and the thought bubble over the wife is, I wonder what he's thinking. Is he thinking about me? Is he thinking about us? And then the thought bubble over the man is, how do flies stick to the ceiling? It's like completely absurd, just wondering about some silly little thing. Yeah. Anyway, that's exactly the way my brain works.
You've been found out, Morgan. What was your best day ever?
I almost said that I'll probably have to. Yeah, the day my son was born.
Okay, let's park that one. Tick the box on that one.
So we go create. Yeah, we'll forget all of the usual family is the most important. Stuff. We'll get rid of that. Oh, wow, this is a hard one because it relies on memory. Oh, okay. Probably the first. This is a double-edged sword. The first contract that I signed with a publisher who was a comic publisher, because I've found a publisher, I've bypassed the literary agent, gauntlet, and I've managed to find someone that A, loves my work, B, is interested in all of it, and C, will help me promote and get this thing out there. Creatively, that was amazing, because it was the thing that I want to do. Someone's going to let me do it. That was great. The double-edged side of that is they turned it out to be a terrible publisher. I've sunk a project and money into them that'll never go anywhere. Horrendous experience, terrible contract I should never have signed. I've learnt since then, but that moment, the month around when I knew the contract was coming and then it was signed, I was just giddy. It was just this wonderful sense of validation and, hey, I could actually do this thing. And since then, I've signed multiple other contracts and I'm a bit wiser about how it works and all the rest of it. But I still do get a little bit of that giddy/wariness whenever I sign a new contract.
You obviously love what you do, but when you talk about win happy, you do have those win moments when that sense of satisfaction when the ball hits the back of the net, and that is exactly what you're describing. So your work, Morgan, where can people find it? How can they purchase your books and your comics?
So the easiest way is just to go to morganquaid.com. You'll find links there to anything, including social media links. I'm also all over social media. I'm not very shy. But yeah, morganquaid.com. All my stuff's up on Amazon. There is a lot coming through the pipeline that hasn't come out yet that will be coming out. Actually, so there's another 7 odd comics this year and another 3 novels this year that will be coming out bit by bit. But yeah, I'll always update morganquaid.com. And by all means, anyone that's interested or that would like to chat, I'm always happy to have a chat or talk about projects or ideas and stuff.
Brilliant, Morgan. Are you winning happy?
I am winning happy, definitely.
Good man yourself. Well, listen, enjoy your winter.
Thank you.
And say hello to Summer, your character. We will discover who she's based on. And it's not the mother-in-law, apparently.
No, definitely not.
Yeah. The very best of luck to you. I feel you need to give up that full-time job, but it's doing something for you at the moment and it's giving you that little bit of balance. But you probably need to wave goodbye to her at some point. And maybe walk on a beach or have more pina coladas with your wife and think of her instead of the fly in the ceiling. Listen, take it easy. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Cheers. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the Win Happy podcast, which has been brought to you by Fusion Communications. If you'd like to get in touch, feel free to send me an email at greg@fusion.ie. So until next time, take it easy.